Hi, I'm Grace Lynch. Welcome to another video. It's a bit more on memory work and sort of laying out the process that I use. So one of the things that I found in having to process my trauma, once I had been through brain rehab and I could begin sorting out how to relate my inside experience to self-expression, to re-engage with the world around me and rebuild relationships, rebuild my place in the world in a way that I could understand, was the intrusive nature of past experiences, mechanisms, reactions. Um, and this was both waking and sleep. Uh, Providers have explained to me a little bit about PTSD. The VA helps me a lot with the clonidine, helps me process better in my waking state, and my prazosin helps me survive nightmares better in my sleeping state. They're similar, and I'm not saying anybody else take them. I'm just saying this is what providers are giving me, and it sort of helped slow down my physical reaction to overwhelm. And they're blood pressure medications, so go figure. It's very weird. In any case, what I found in having to process these intrusive experiences, they would knock my efforts to re-engage with the world offline. As I was trying to find my way back in off the streets and how to live in an apartment and how to have relationship with providers and build up my sense of where to get care, how to get care, people safe to talk to, a lot of different factors. I found that inside those efforts, I would have these sudden triggerings that would spin me off into things that I didn't know how to process. And when this kept happening, and I looked for trauma care, only to discover that there were no providers I could find that specialized in working with synesthetic, aphasic, brain injured, autistic people. I had to find a way to cope with the experiences myself. And as a sober person, I had to find a way to do that without resorting to recreational chemistry. So this caused me coffee to explore the nature of the experiences and to begin to detect. I always found that they were. I came to eventually to the idea of an undigested memory. That if I let go of the usual model that I was taught about trauma, that it is cognitively based, and the usual approach that I had seen had been to, because providers had tried this with me, to try to reframe. And essentially, it seemed to be a way of looking at an experience and reframing it from being the norm to being something exceptional, and by relativizing it to a larger context, reduce my reaction to it, and then be reframing the triggering so that when it did happen, I could restore myself to a sense of cognitive and relational safety inside not being as lost in the reaction. It was sort of like finding, I don't know, a cognitive life preserver in the present, and then acting as if that's a new relationship with the past. I guess in a sense that it was, but it didn't work for me very well because it didn't actually resolve the time jumping, the time slipping. Time jumping is a term that I use to identify the mechanism in play when I was getting blindsided in my efforts to re-engage with life by these past experiences. I'd find myself lost in things that weren't happening anymore. And initially, I wanted to find a new story to make it all better. I wanted to find a way to look at, okay, that experience happened, and those things rarely happen, and this is why I don't have to be afraid of it. Unfortunately, the more that I was getting to know myself post-brain rehab, I had a lot to sort out. And what I found was that when I looked at my past, almost all of it was traumatic. There was sexual abuse, there was physical abuse, there was homelessness, there was medical misdiagnosis, there was sitting in a chair having rounds of electricity, running repeated hospitalizations, not being able to have a career, not being able to understand what had happened to me when I lost language, not being able to form effective relationships, stay in a marriage, not being able to reason with other people the way that I reason with myself, not being able to understand my earlier experiences when I had my what turned out to be autistic gifts. So most of my past was a form of trauma. There was no basis of normal experiences I could find to make the trauma experiences exceptional. I couldn't do the lifeboat thing. So the experiences kept happening, and it became more practical for me to take a step back and look initially at the phenomenon of the experiences in terms of their difference, and look at what made them different from normal memories. Not to resolve them, not to solve my problem with them, but just to understand what the differences were. Sort of like finding them, this is an orange, this is an apple. Oh, an apple has this kind of roundness, but it's got a little dimples in the top and bottom. It's a different shininess, and the orange has pecks like a golf ball and things like that. So one of the things I noticed about trauma memories is that when I engage with a normal memory, I engage with it without getting lost in the experience of what happened in the past, without getting lost in the experience of what's happening in the present. When I think about my finally succeeding in making the recipe for Katharine Hepburn's New York Times recipe for brownies last week, after having 2 attempts that were just horrible violations of nature when they came out of the oven, I can't even explain. It's just like, I finally got it right, and I came out and they were lovely. Well, when I go back to that experience, I can turn to that in my consciousness and my awareness without losing track of what's happening in the present. In a sense, I can be both people at the same time. I can turn my awareness here without losing my sense of the present, and I can look at the present and feel my relationship with that memory, and there's no feeling of conflict. I'm fine with that. What I found with trauma memories is that when I turn to them and want to engage with having been the person who lived through them, it's so captivating, it's so overwhelming that I lose track of my connection with the present. In a sense, I time jump to the past. I do this kind of back and forth thing. The difficult thing about traumas isn't that they're difficult experiences, it's that it takes me offline with being in the present moment. My body has me have to experience it as if it's still happening. So that phenomenon of time jumping and noticing that it was happening, and that was the part that set it apart from normal memory. I stopped looking at trauma in terms of resolving my problem with what happened, and started looking at trauma functionally in terms of how it interfered the memory itself, the function of the memory and how it played out in my consciousness interfered with my efforts to relate and build my new relationship with the outside world. And so then that became a new symptom. It became a functional way to look at memories that, and as I began to find a way to process them, which I get into in neurodiverse recovery, the inventory process. As these experiences, as I began to learn how to explore them so that they would teach me about who I was in the moment, I found that the difference was that when I had gone through traumatic memories in the past, I had been going through them not knowing if I was going to survive. The advantage of having a structure as the person I am today is the ability, with the help of the groundingness of the structure, I'm doing a thing when I revisit them, is that I can go back to them as the person who did survive. And then when I want to go back and be the person inside the experience, I can look at what I experienced sensorily and emotionally and cognitively and belief, not from having to survive it anymore. And then I can begin using that as new information about myself and get to know myself, how I work inside the trauma memory. And when I started to see that, then it became much more helpful to have a traumatic experience come up and label it as that's a trauma thing. How do I know? Because it gives me the experience of time jumping. It's a symptom. And then I put that away and I know that I've got to do memory work on it. So that's about time jumping. More another time. Bye.